So I've got this huge backlog of stuff to cover in Nerd Files.
Okay.
And Jesus, I've got you on a taller stool than me.
Okay, here's your.
You back over here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
Why am I so short? I know I'm short.
I don't know. I'm just a tall guy. I'm a tall guy. Okay.
Okay, so we have a huge backlog of Nerd Files content to deliver. It's been months since I've made a Nerd Files episode because I've been really busy, and I haven't had the energy, and it takes a little bit of energy.
Yeah.
So this is Jacob Huseby.
Hi, I'm Jacob.
He has energy, and he's fed me some energy this morning in our discussions. He's also a totally certifiable nerd. I think he's got the card somewhere.
I left it in my rental car, but it's here. I do
Yeah.
have it with me.
Yeah, Jacob works for the legendary Andy Gerlach and really kind of runs the show at Enjoy Winter. They distribute 14 different Nordic brands, and among them are these SRB structure tools. And we've started to work with these, and we're sort of in the initial phases of, I'll optimistically call it a partnership, because I think it can lead to some fun stuff and some development. Jacob's going to describe the tool to us at some length, but first we want to talk about hand structure and what it is, where it comes from, some of the history, and why it's so critical. And I'm going to start with the level of criticalness that it currently occupies. In the fluoro-free world, as we remove that last percent that can be delivered by the performance of fluorocompounds, the focus gets placed everywhere else it can be placed. Let's be really clear. World Cup teams still have budgets. They still have money to spend, and they have time and resources. And those resources are all getting placed where the biggest differences can be made on the snow. There's a lot of background testing of skis. The grinding programs have been turned up, but maybe more than anything else, hand structure has become a massive focus. It has always been a really big focus because the benefits of hand structure are very well known and established in higher level racing. It's been used at all levels of racing, and we're going to get into some of the why. But suffice it to say that right now, every high level tech that I've spoken with agrees that hand structure is only going to gain in importance in the coming years. One of the reasons we're looking at this SRB tool is that we need a platform that is expandable, where we can start to work in cooperation with a company to develop solutions that are specific to our snow. North American snow is very, very different from European snow. We know this from years of testing. And we need a collaboration moving forward. Let's talk just a little bit about what hand structure is. Hand structure has existed for years, and it kind of started as rills. I remember being a high school skier, that my first trip to the Eastern High School Championships, some of the kids from northern Vermont came to our room. Charlie Boswell and I were in a room at the old training center in Lake Placid, and some of the northern Vermont skiers came looking for bottle caps. They wanted bottle caps because they were going to use the serrated edge to press structure into their skis because it was going to be wet. And I don't know why they thought we were going to have bottle caps, of all things. I would have thought the northern kids had the bottle caps. Regardless, not too long after, the Swix Super Riller became kind of de rigueur. This was the definitive riller of the 80s, 90s. It's still in everybody's box, this Swix 2
Before I came around, yeah,
before Jacob. He hadn't even seen it. He didn't know
I wasn't
what
even born yet, actually.
But this thing, us old folks love this tool, and some of us file the bars down. I think Swix must still sell this. It's a great tool.
We have one in our box at the shop too.
But early days, sophistication moved beyond the old Super Riller and got right into some complexity. This SSM tool, I believe I got this from my good friend Walter Piekler, who's now working with Kessely in developing and moving skis. He's back in the US after a stint back in Austria. This is a German tool, I believe, and this is one of the early counter-rotating tools where you have a drum that gets driven by some friction, some O-rings on the ski in it, and it turns the opposite direction of the movement of the tool and kind of cuts a structure in. But at the same time, there are many imprint tools that are just rolling tools. This This stack of brass drums got put on a handle, and this is still a viable tool made by Len Johnson at V2, where you have a pattern milled in, and it just rolls down and imprints onto the ski. So very, very different ways of working. On the one hand, you've got a stationary cutting bar that just presses structure in, and it depresses material and does some cutting. On the other hand, you have a rolling drum that imprints with pressure, and then on yet the most sophisticated level, you have a counter-rotating drum that does a combination of imprinting and cutting. When we say cutting, we are not actually removing material from the ski. All of these compress the ski. The really aggressive old structure bars compress and displace enough material to be semi-permanent. They will mostly come out, but by and large, these structures are transient and temporary and will rebound out of the ski with the application of heat. You need an wax that has an iron temperature of about 150 degrees. A couple applications of that wax will usually bounce the structure right out. And so while the modification of the base is ongoing every time a ski leaves the shop after grinding, hand structure is not a permanent modification. Some of these tools, some of the more aggressive ones, might be a little harder to bounce out. They're not the same as grinding. Many times in the past, I've worked for customers who want to have a blank ski, like literally as flat as we can make it, and they're just going to use hand structure to manage the snow. These imprint tools work on a different scale and at a different level from grinds. Grinds cut the base and they make the base material into a three-dimensional shape that has texture, pattern, depth, roughness, all of the things that contribute to grinds operating really well. These imprint tools are optimizers. They introduce another level of efficiency. At most scales of interaction, the imprint tools work more or less independent of the structures. We're very sensitive in our structure design to the fact that most of our grinds are going to end up with imprint tools used on them, and they need to be tolerant. One of the places that you can really go off the rails is with one of these aggressive linear structures on top of a linear thread pattern on the ski. If we make, say, a simple linear grind on the ski, like an old LJ03 or something, 22 lines per centimeter linear, that's actually a thread pattern and it crosses the ski at a slight angle. And then we take this linear structure bar and maybe it's a 1 mil instead of a 2 mil and we lay that on, and all of a sudden you have all these intersections that are pressed very deeply into the ski, and you have a compound structure with very many very sharp knives. That's a massive adjustment to that ski.
Yeah.
Whereas most of these rolling tools are much more gentle and they don't introduce that level of disruption to the original structure. So you have to have some sensitivity. Some hand tools on some grinds create its own structure. This can be done on purpose at a very high level. There was a grind that the Matsus development grind department made that actually included a hand structure as part of it, where they made a structure. This is Seefeld World Championships, and it was some Russian guy got a medal. What was his name? I can't remember now. The Russians have been gone for so long, I can't remember their names. Anyway, the skis were very, very good, but it was a structure that was basically an engineered compound structure involving hand structure. Yep. And so that we've played with that. It can work, but by and large, we're talking about this as an additional layer on top of a grind. Optimal grind, optimal hand structure combined to create a higher level of performance. And they make easily as much of a difference as good wax selection. I mean, easily
often
as
more.
Much of a difference.
I would argue often more.
Very often more.
Yeah, yeah.
Some companies will say that they are always better. In fact, when we discussed with Frank there, the dude who makes these, I think one of the things he said, they're always better. Maybe in Middle Europe.
Every single one. Every 30 roll is better.
They're not always better in North America.
Yeah.
We always test an unmodified ski, 100% of the time.
Yep.
And sometimes they're better. Now, this last weekend in Lake Placid, it was extremely cold, 0 degrees Fahrenheit, very sharp snow. These are conditions where we might expect no additional hand structure to be better. But the unmodified ski was very non-competitive. Every single structure modified ski that we put on the snow made an improvement.
Yeah.
It's not always better to have no additional structure in cold and dry conditions.
Right.
Sometimes it's quite high moisture new snow where in fact the structure gets too interactive and we want to stay away from
Yep.
it. It can be a little unpredictable, but by and large, we're looking to get the benefit of these hand structures in racing. The purpose of structure. Jacob, you said this really well. What are we actually doing with these tools?
Yeah, we are pressing a pattern into the ski. Whenever we are working with cambers and grinds and structure and wax, at the fundamental level, we are actually managing the relationship between creating a thin film of moisture and repelling that thin film of moisture. If we're not doing a good enough job creating a thin film of moisture, it's like skiing on sandpaper. And if we create too much moisture beneath the ski, then it's like suction cups, right? It can fill in all those little air gaps and really slow you down. And so, in the case of our hand structure, we are pressing a macro structure into the ski to channel away moisture or to create moisture. And as you can see, there are a lot of different ways to do that here.
I think the proliferation of different ways to do it reflects that there's another element to this whole thing that isn't only moisture related,
Right.
but is very much crystal related. We're extremely concerned with the physical interaction between the snow, the solid snow, and the moisture, and the base, and all of this in motion. You set up different states of interaction in the base. Sometimes you're talking about snow that is characterized by plastic deformation. Plastic deformation is when you push on something, the shape changes, and it stays changed. This is compacting snow. It often results in glazing conditions. The moisture can come up. Snow that undergoes plastic deformation tends to have less of a crystal signature at the interface. But you also have snow that stays dry, rolls. You set up a state of viscous flow under the ski. And this is where it gets super challenging. And the exact pattern that you use, the number of interruptions, the direction of the lines, the spacing of the lines, and the angle of the cuts has a profound impact on the interaction of those solid particles in movement under the ski. This is not a small subject, and it takes a lot to work through it. Okay, in the history of our time working, we've used a lot of different tools. This SSM was pretty cool at the time, but we haven't used it in years. It's not competitive with some of the new ones. Swix has had these structure tools for a while. This one dates back quite a while, but Swix ultimately ended up buying Finite tools. This was made by the Jensens in Idaho. Nathan Schultz and I visited them, and we got these CP17 rollers made as sort of a copy of the Holmenkohl
The mouse tool.
mouse tool.
Yeah, that's right.
Because everyone needs one of those, but we wanted one that was a little more robust. These aren't available anymore because Swix bought them, and I don't know if Swix is using them anymore. The tools that we at Caldwell Sport have focused on primarily for the last decade plus are these Red Creek tools. Now, these things are brilliant. They are very well designed patterns that are built on rollers with bearings in their own applicator. Every tool comes with a handle, and they're super easy to use. They're just rolling tools. There's no counter rotation. They're very robust. We've tested them enough. We've got a menu of about 5 structure tools that really can cover pretty much all conditions with a high level of confidence. We use them at very high levels. They're World Cup worthy tools, and they're very good. In this new world, we want to look beyond that. The Red Creek tools are a fantastic starting point.
So user-friendly. I can hand that tool to somebody, and I know that they will be able to do a good job with it.
And so
Just
we're
like
definitely
awesome.
not putting them down. We're definitely still working with them, and we want to continue. But as we look into the future, I, this fall, spent a fair amount of time looking at different options. One of them, I worked with, I got some of these Speedy ski roller tools, boy, over 10 years ago, closer to 15 years ago now. I continue to use those. These are really popular at a World Cup level, and the US team makes a ton of use of these. I think they still have 1 or 2 of my kits, those jerks. I never got them back. From like
put your name on
2011 World Championships. At any rate, I got these back in 2008 or something and started working with them. They remain super viable and were interesting, but my experience at the time was that it was hard to speak Finnish. And
Still is, actually,
yeah, it was difficult to get feedback on the tools. They're very expensive. All of these things are very expensive. You got to imagine milling these things as a one-off. It's pretty time-consuming and expensive process. Yeah. So the main thing that I wanted out of any forward-looking project was the option for collaboration. And we arranged a Zoom meeting with Frank, with Jacob, and with Andy earlier this fall, and just kind of went through an introduction to the tool. I didn't ask for specific instructions of when to use which drum, because that's our job. We got to figure that out.
Yeah.
What I wanted was to talk to the guy who made the tools, understand his starting point, and figure out whether there's an option moving forward to try to steer some development specific to our regional conditions. North America is a wild place between the Northwest, which is like Japan, and the upper Midwest, which is like Siberia, and
Yeah.
the East, which is unlike anything else and changes minute to minute. We have challenging conditions, and all of our snow demands different solutions from sort of the standards in Europe. The other thing that's most interesting about SRB is just the level of refinement in the selection of materials and the shapes of the cuts. Jacob, maybe you can go through these tools and just discuss some of the variables in the structured drum design.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of mind-blowing.
We have a lot to work with here. And when we have many roles to work with, we can get pretty granular when it comes to the specific materials that we're using, the specific like coarseness, right? The specific patterns that we're working with, and these can all have an impact. The identical pattern and coarseness on rolls, with the only difference being a brass versus a steel. And if you have your example, actually, so these are two identical rolls that we have in front of us. One is a brass and one is a stainless steel. And despite them being identical, except for the material, that has a significant impact on how they can perform. So that would be the first thing, is even just looking at this box, you can see we have stainless rolls, well, we have brass rolls and we have stainless rolls, and that can have a big impact, the brass being a softer metal, right? That's the first thing.
It's considerable when we work with them on the skis.
Yeah.
The brass almost disappears into the ski. You've got to get quite low and down and look at it on the light, and then you see it very clearly.
Yeah.
But they don't displace or turn up as nearly as much material. The steel tools tend to be much more aggressive. I think at a very, very fine level, they put little shoulders next to the imprints and create more dimension and more sharpness in the structure. Sometimes that's very beneficial, and other times it's very not beneficial.
Right. Just going like immediate apparent details down to finer details perhaps as we dig into these a little bit more. So the very first thing someone may notice is the material. The second thing would be the pattern that's being pressed into the ski actually. So you have everything from like ultra fine linears. I had here I'll grab actually 501.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, we can do that. So you have your ultra fine linears, but then you also have, I don't know if you can see that kind of crazy pattern there. The second thing that I would look at after material is the pattern that's being pressed into the ski itself. And you can see here we have a wide range of different patterns that can be pressed. You have the chevron patterns that many folks are familiar with. You have linear patterns. You have some really, really unique patterns. You have some patterns that are a split screw pattern that actually have the screw actually going different directions on this single roll, where you may have some rolls that are made to be used in conjunction with each other or individually as a cross screw, similar to our Holman Cole mouse tool. Although I will say V501 and 502, I think I like it a little bit more. I don't know. That's, you know.
Our Holman Cole tool is about 1.7 millimeter thread pitch. This is 1.5, and then we have a 2 in the 511. We raced on that. We raced on both of these, the 1.5 and the 2 this weekend in Lake Placid. Maybe they need a 1.7. Who knows? There's a lot to work with.
There's a lot to work with.
The other thing that we need to talk about, and the main reason I was interested in pursuing these, is the level of control in the angle of the cut. Now, all of these Red Creek tools are cut at a very steep angle so that the knife that faces the ski is like a 120-degree angle or something like that.
Right.
That's sharp. So that's going to put a very narrow, deep imprint into the ski. With these tools, we have 3 different cut angles. They can have 120, they can have a 90, or they can have a 60-degree cut angle, which creates a much shallower, more faceted structure. They also all have the ability to be run either as a press tool or put into...
Yes, you can put it into this tool and run it in reverse.
Right. Put into here and then run as a counter-rotating tool. Now, there's a considerable difference between, even on one of these linear structures, just pressing it in, which is relatively mild, and counter-rotating it. The pattern is identical, but the amount of material moved is higher when it's counter-rotating. And the level of granularity that we can achieve utilizing the same pattern in different ways, in different materials with different cut angles is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, these an immediate difference that these tools have versus perhaps its predecessors is that the SRB tools are finding more use in colder conditions where perhaps we had not considered hand structure in the past, right? In colder conditions, we're focusing more on, among many things, creating a thin film of moisture to glide on. And so with hand structures of the past, a lot of the focus was perhaps channeling moisture away. With these, with the combination of a greater combination of shapes and angles, we are able to make less aggressive structures and finer structures and patterns that allow us to ski in much colder conditions faster than simply skiing on a grind. Yeah.
In general, we haven't had a lot of luck with very, very fine structures with the tools that we've used in the past. This weekend already, we raced on this one, and it's a very fine structure, and we used that as a cut tool, using the tractor box, using the counter. It was geared, using the counter rotation. Yeah. We tested it both ways.
We had Annika on. It was also very cold at Ski de Ski and Berkey Trails. It was like minus 18 C or 0 Fahrenheit.
And we're finding advantages, considerable advantages. Okay, so what are there? Are there 30 drums in here?
There are 30 and there are more, actually.
Right. This thing costs, what, $3,000 at retail? Maybe team price is discounted a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit.
It's impractical.
It's impractical. You don't need this many tools, and I promise you, you don't need the full 30-roll kit to be competitive. The reason why Zach and I have this, both of us have the 30-roll kit. I left mine at home because I assumed I could. Can I borrow this
Yes,
weekend? Okay, good. Thank you. Is because we want to put these on snow here in North America and in the Northeast as well as in the Midwest, and we have our Alaska rep Ben working in Alaska to figure out what few rolls we can really distill this down to by region and have regional kits. And to say, hey, if you live in the Midwest and you're racing in the Midwest, you only need these maybe 4 or 5 rolls to be super competitive.
The goal is to achieve a higher level of performance with the kind of simplicity that we have in the Red Creek system. Where we can recommend 5 tools at a budget of around $400 that's going to get you competitive. Your starting budget's going to be slightly higher on this, but not by more than about $100. The expandability of this is vast, and the opportunity to develop. Now I'm going to be very forthright. I called Koge Lundqvist earlier this fall because I want more structure tools.
Right.
I need to push this project along. We need to advance the cause in North America, remain competitive, and remain at the cutting edge. I believe that we do some of the best work at a domestic level for ski service in North America of any country in the world. I think the level of sophistication is high, the appetite for good information is high, and we're super privileged to be part of a market that really wants good stuff.
Yeah.
Our job is to try to continue to advance. Koge didn't have any new stuff in the pipeline. He's a little more focused on his wax, I will continue to work with these tools, and I love them, but as we move forward, Frank is very willing to take direction, and I already have a drum we're going to talk about this.
Oh, awesome.
I want to ask him.
I do too.
To make. So, one weekend of competition in, we have a direction that we want to go in, and we've had success. And we've had success from a bunch of structure tools, and Red Creek was not at the top. We're accustomed to it being very good, and teams had really good success, but I think we had better solutions in here. We did have to cast a broad net. We were running field testing. That's not optimal.
Not ideal. Not ideal.
We want to run more controlled paired glide outs, but I wanted more structure on the snow. So when I can make singles, get stuff out there, and be directive with our testers, who are my wife, who's really good. I can take information from her anywhere in the world and make good use of it. She knows how to feel the flat ski glide, the higher speed performance of the ski that's applicable to a classic race, which is what we were in. So we're really trying to cast a net right now and get control of this. We'd love to talk about this with you guys. Enjoy Winter is a great resource, but I think we'll be accumulating information just as fast as they are. And we'll be communicating quite a lot and working toward solutions that I think represent the highest level of performance that can be achieved with hand structure.
Yeah, super exciting. I'm really excited.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah.